Story 1. I never expected a simple coffee run to turn into the most terrifying experience of my life. It all began one chilly autumn evening when I decided to visit my local Starbucks. The place was usually bustling with people, the warm aroma of coffee filling the air. Little did I know that this visit would leave me scarred forever. As I entered the coffee shop, I was greeted by the friendly barista, Sarah. She flashed me a warm smile and took my order, a grand caramel macchiato. I took a seat by the window and watched the world outside while I waited for my drink. Minutes turned into hours, and I began to grow impatient. My coffee should have been ready by now, but Sarah was nowhere to be seen. I glanced around the shop and noticed that something was off. The other customers were eerily still, their faces frozen in expressions of dread. The low hum of conversation had been replaced by an uncomfortable silence. I stood up and walked toward the counter, my heart pounding in my chest. Behind the counter, I saw Sarah, but her smile had faded, replaced by an expression of terror. She was staring at something on the floor, and I followed her gaze. To my horror, I saw a dark, shadowy figure crawling across the tiles. It moved with an unnatural, jerky motion, like a marionette being controlled by an unseen puppeteer. My skin crawled as I watched it inch closer to Sarah. Without thinking, I rushed forward and grabbed Sarah, pulling her away from the advancing shadow. She was trembling, unable to speak. We both stared in terror as the shadow continued its slow approach. Just when it seemed like all hope was lost, the shop's lights flickered, and the shadow retreated, vanishing into thin air. The other customers snapped out of their trance, and the low hum of conversation returned. Sarah and I were left shaken and bewildered. We decided to leave Starbucks immediately, but as we reached the door, we heard a faint whisper, like a breeze through dry leaves. It spoke in a chilling, otherworldly voice, "You can't escape. It's always with you." We rushed out of the cafe, never looking back. I couldn't explain what had just happened, and neither could Sarah. We never returned to that Starbucks, and the memory of that haunting brew continues to haunt our dreams. As the days turned into weeks, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had latched onto me during that encounter. Strange things began happening in my life, objects moving on their own, eerie whispers in the dead of night, and an unshakable feeling of being watched. I sought the help of paranormal experts and mediums, but nothing could rid me of the malevolent presence that had entered my life. It was as if the Starbucks incident had opened a door to the supernatural, and I was now trapped in its sinister grip. I live in constant fear, knowing that the shadowy entity from that fateful night is always with me, lurking in the darkest corners of my existence. I can't escape it, and I can't forget the horrors I witnessed at that Starbucks. So, if you ever find yourself in a seemingly ordinary Starbucks, be cautious. Story 2. You never know when a simple coffee run could turn into a nightmare that haunts you for the rest of your days. It was a stormy night in the small town of Brooksville, and I was seeking refuge from the relentless rain that had been pouring down for hours. The neon sign of the local Starbucks beckoned to me like a lighthouse in the darkness. Little did I know that entering that seemingly ordinary coffee shop would plunge me into a nightmare I could never have imagined. I pushed open the heavy glass door, the familiar scent of coffee beans washing over me like a warm embrace. The place was nearly empty, save for a lone barista behind the counter, a young woman with jet black hair and a disconcerting lack of expression on her face. I approached the counter and ordered a tall hot chocolate. The barista nodded silently and began preparing my drink. As I waited, I noticed the odd absence of background noise. There were no conversations, no clinking of cups, just an eerie silence that hung heavily in the air. Finally, my hot chocolate was ready, and the barista placed it on the counter without a word. I paid and turned to find a seat by the window. The rain was still coming down in torrents, and I was content to watch it while sipping my drink. Minutes turned into hours, and I lost track of time. I was startled when I realized that the barista had not moved from behind the counter. She stood there, staring blankly ahead, as if frozen in time. It was then that I noticed something even more unsettling. The rain outside the window was frozen mid-drop, as if time had come to a standstill. A sense of unease settled over me, and I stood up to investigate further. As I walked closer to the counter, I felt a cold chill in the air, and my breath fogged in front of me. The barista's eyes, which had been vacant moments ago, now bore into me with a malevolent intensity. Before I could react, the lights in the coffee shop flickered and went out. Panic welled up inside me as I fumbled for my phone, using its flashlight to navigate the darkness. When I shone the light on the counter, the barista was gone, and the hot chocolate she had poured for me lay untouched. I made my way to the exit, desperate to escape the eerie silence and the unnatural stillness that had engulfed the Starbucks. But as I reached the door, a soft, haunting whisper filled the air, "You can't leave. None of us can." I froze, the voice seeming to come from all directions at once. The lights flickered back on, revealing that I was no longer alone. The coffee shop was now filled with ghostly figures, patrons frozen in time, their faces etched with terror. I tried to push past them, but their icy hands reached out to grab me, holding me in place. The barista appeared before me, her eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. "You've entered our domain," she whispered, her voice echoing in my mind. "You're one of us now." In that moment, I felt a strange sensation wash over me, as if I were being pulled into a vortex of time and memory. I saw flashes of the coffee shop's history, the countless customers who had entered its doors, only to become trapped in this timeless nightmare. I tried to resist, to break free from their grasp, but it was futile. I had become a part of the Starbucks curse, condemned to spend eternity in this frozen moment, surrounded by the haunted souls of those who had come before me. Days turned into weeks, and I lost all sense of time. I became one of them, a ghostly figure trapped in a never-ending loop of despair. The once comforting aroma of coffee now filled me with dread, a reminder of the life I had lost. I watched as others entered the Starbucks, their faces filled with curiosity, unaware of the horror that awaited them. I tried to warn them, to scream out, but my voice was lost in the silence of this cursed place. As the years passed, I watched as the town of Brooksville changed around me. New businesses came and went, but Starbucks remained, an eternal fixture in the heart of the town. The curse continued to claim new victims, each one adding to the ever-growing chorus of trapped souls. I often wondered what had brought about this curse. Was it a malevolent force that had taken hold of the coffee shop, or was it something darker, a punishment for some long-forgotten transgression? I may never know the answer, but one thing was clear: I was doomed to spend eternity in this Starbucks purgatory. Story 3. And so, if you ever find yourself in the town of Brooksville and see a Starbucks with an eerie stillness hanging in the air, I urge you to turn and walk away. For once you enter, there is no escape from the franchise curse, and you too will become a ghostly figure trapped in a never-ending nightmare. The sun was setting over the quiet suburban town of Willowbrook, casting long shadows that stretched across the streets. I had just finished a long day at work and felt the need for a pick-me-up. As if on cue, the familiar green and white sign of Starbucks came into view, promising the warmth of brewed coffee and the comforting hum of espresso machines. The parking lot was nearly empty as I pulled into a space near the entrance. A glance at my watch told me it was just past 8 p.m., and I expected the coffee shop to be relatively quiet at this hour. Little did I know that this evening's visit to Starbucks would be far from ordinary, plunging me into a nightmare I could never have imagined. I pushed open the glass door, the soft chime signaling my arrival. The interior was dimly lit, with a few customers scattered throughout, engrossed in their laptops or books. The aroma of coffee beans filled the air, a scent that never failed to bring comfort. I approached the counter, where a young barista named Emma greeted me with a warm smile. "What can I get you tonight?" she asked in a cheerful tone. "A grand caramel latte, please," I replied, appreciating the friendly service. Emma swiftly prepared my drink, The familiar sounds of steaming milk and coffee beans grinding providing a sense of normalcy in an otherwise uneventful evening. I settled into a plush armchair near the window, the warm cup of coffee cradled in my hands. Rain had started to fall outside, tapping gently against the glass. It was the kind of night that made you appreciate the small comforts in life. As I sipped my latte, I couldn't help but notice the stillness in the coffee shop. The soft murmur of conversation that usually filled the air was conspicuously absent. It was as if time had slowed to a crawl, and the world outside had fallen into a deep hush. I glanced around the coffee shop, my eyes falling on the other patrons. They sat frozen in their seats, their expressions etched with an eerie mixture of fear and confusion. The woman by the counter had her hand suspended midair, as if reaching for her laptop but unable to move. Panic coursed through me, and I set my coffee down, my heart pounding in my chest. Is anyone else seeing this? I called out to the frozen patrons, but my voice seemed to get lost in the silence. I stood up, my footsteps echoing loudly in the stillness, and approached the counter where Emma had been. But Emma was gone, and the coffee machine stood motionless, the steam from its wand frozen in midair. A shiver ran down my spine as I realized that something was terribly wrong. I took out my phone, its screen illuminating the eerie scene before me. I tried to dial 911, but the call wouldn't connect. The digital clock on my phone was stuck at 8:15 p.m., refusing to budge. With a growing sense of dread, I turned to the window and watched as the raindrops hung in the air, frozen like crystalline tears. It was as if time itself had come to a standstill, trapping me in this surreal moment. As I struggled to comprehend the situation, a low, haunting whisper filled the air. It seemed to emanate from every corner of the coffee shop, echoing in my mind. "Welcome to our world," the voice murmured, sending a shiver down my spine. I turned toward the source of the voice and saw a shadowy figure standing in the corner of the coffee shop. It was tall and elongated, its form shifting and wavering like smoke. Its eyes, two orbs of malevolent red, fixed on me with an intensity that made my blood run cold. I stumbled backward, my heart racing. "Who are you?" I stammered, my voice trembling. "We are the forgotten," the shadowy figure replied, its voice a chilling whisper. "Trapped in this in-between, this liminal space. And now, you are one of us." Before my eyes, the other patrons began to move, their actions synchronized as if they were part of a macabre dance. The frozen coffee machines whirred to life, spewing out streams of scalding hot coffee that splashed onto the floor, sizzling as they hit the frozen raindrops. I tried to flee, but the patrons moved with an unnatural speed, blocking my path. Their faces contorted in anguish as they reached out toward me, their touch icy and lifeless. The shadowy figure drew closer, its presence suffocating. "You entered our domain, and now you are bound by the curse of Starbucks," it whispered, its red eyes burning with malevolence. "You will never leave." With a surge of terror, I realized that I had become a prisoner in this nightmarish coffee shop, trapped in a timeless purgatory along with the other unfortunate souls who had entered its doors. Days turned into weeks, and I lost all sense of time. The patrons and I were trapped in an endless loop, reliving the same moments over and over. We were unable to communicate, our voices drowned out by the haunting whispers that filled the air. I watched as new customers entered the Starbucks, their faces filled with the same sense of anticipation and longing for a warm cup of coffee. They too were drawn into the curse, joining our ranks of the forgotten. I often wondered about the origins of this curse. Had it been placed on Starbucks by some malevolent force? Or was it a punishment for some unknown transgression committed by the coffee shop itself? The answers remained elusive, hidden in the shadows that enveloped us. As the years passed, I saw the town of Willowbrook change outside the coffee shop's windows. New businesses opened, and old ones closed, but Starbucks remained a constant, an unchanging fixture in the heart of the town. The curse continued to claim new victims, each one becoming a ghostly figure trapped in a never-ending nightmare. And so, If you ever find yourself in Willowbrook and see the green and white sign of Starbucks, I urge you to turn and walk away. For once you enter, there is no escape from the inescapable brew, and you too will become a prisoner in this timeless purgatory, forever bound by the curse of Starbucks.